Unfortunately, Neo, nobody can tell you what the spark gap is. You have to see it for yourself. I really need the long leather coat if I'm going to try and pull this off. Anyway, a couple of weeks ago in January, I produced a video about the cost of running my heat pump in the coldest month of the year. And you guys had a lot to say about that video in the comments. Well, today I thought I would revisit it. We would expand the scope slightly. We would look at what does it cost to run a heat pump from the beginning of December all the way through to the end of February, or what the weather service call meteorological winter. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to look at what happens if you do everything right. You have large batteries, you make sure you've got the right tariff, you're optimizing, you're doing everything you can to reduce the running costs of your heat pump. Is it still cheaper than gas? Well, we're about to find out. Before we get into the numbers, let's talk about the spark gap. Heat pumps are about 3 to 4 times more efficient than gas boilers. So if electricity costs the same per kilowatt hour as gas, heat pumps would win easily. But electricity doesn't cost the same. Electricity is about 4 to 5 times the price of gas per kilowatt hour. That difference is called the spark gap. Heat pumps win on efficiency, but gas wins on fuel cost. And whichever one is stronger, to be honest, wins overall. Okay, let's set ourselves a baseline. First of all, I said in the introduction we were going to look at what did it cost to run the heat pump from the beginning of December through to the end of February. So let's take a look at the numbers that came directly from the Shelly EM monitoring device that sits in the consumer unit next to the heat pump. So in December, we used 384 kilowatt hours. In January, that jumped up to 510 kilowatt hours. And then in February, as things started to get a little bit warmer, we only used 317 kilowatt hours. Now, for each of those months, the heat pump produced quite a lot more heat. So in December, it produced 1,506 kilowatt hours, giving us a coefficient of performance for that month of 3.92. In January, 1,769 kilowatt hours for a coefficient of performance of 3.46. And in February, 1,223 kilowatt hours for a coefficient of performance of 3.85. So you'll see over the course of those 3 months, we never achieved a coefficient of 4, which is what everybody tells you. You've got to have a coefficient of at least 4 for it to be cheaper than gas. Now, this was also done keeping the house at a constant daytime temperature. We don't heat our house at certain times of the day and push the temperature up, then let it cool off again. We keep a constant temperature in the house of between 20 and 21 degrees across all of those 3 months. Then at night time, we set that temperature back to about 17 degrees, just to make it a little bit more comfortable to sleep at night. And again, those numbers I've just given you were for both heating and hot water combined. Now, let's talk a little bit about my setup. And for those that are new to the channel, I have a large battery system in my house, approximately about 40 kilowatt hours of battery storage. Now, that's more than I would say is average. I have a bit of a battery problem in that I can't stop buying them, but most people probably don't have a battery storage system quite that large. But modern battery systems being modular, we're starting to see batteries of about 20 to 30 kilowatts becoming the norm. Now, because of this large battery system, I import 93% of my energy that I use overnight, and I pay 7 pence per kilowatt hour for it. I use this from the Octopus Intelligent Go tariff. So while I'm charging my EVs, I'm also charging my house batteries. And those house batteries are able to see us through about 93% of the day. Now, there are going to be a few days a year where the batteries just aren't enough. And actually in January, there were 6 days this year where we actually ran out of battery power. We also generated a little bit of solar over the winter months. I know people have this common misconception that solar panels are just a waste of time in the winter, but in December, we generated 84 kilowatt hours. In January, another 84 kilowatt hours. And then in February, 227 kilowatt hours. So if we take all of that into account, my average cost for electricity for the whole house over that whole winter period came out as an average of 7.8 pence per kilowatt hour. That means in total, the heat pump cost me about £91 to run for the entire winter. And that is significantly cheaper than gas. But before we talk about gas prices, let's take a look at some other tariffs, because I'm very conscious that most people aren't going to have a battery system a similar size to mine, and therefore the numbers are going to be different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my numbers, my exact usage numbers, which I retrieved from Octopus. These are the half-hourly intervals for that entire 3-month period, and we've mapped those against different tariffs. Now, some of the tariffs have a single price. Some of the tariffs have double prices, a bit like Intelligent Go, where you have a peak and an off peak. And some of the tariffs, like Cozy, actually have 3 different price points per day. And we've mapped that to my exact usage. So I'm going to assume here that I'm a bit lazy and I'm not going to change anything, and we'll see what that comes out at. Now let's start with Cozy, because Cozy is supposed to be the go-to tariff from Octopus for heat pump owners. And if you optimize it right, it can be a lot cheaper than gas to operate. But I suspect most people don't. And if you don't optimize Cozy, if I just took how I run my house this year and applied it to the Cozy tariff, it would have cost me £302 for the 3 months. Now, if we take that Cozy Octopus tariff and we optimize it, and to do that, we're going to need a battery, but we don't necessarily need a large battery. Somewhere in the sort of 10 kilowatt range should do. We can optimize the tariff in conjunction with the battery to bring that price right down. Now, the way we're going to optimize this is we're going to say we're not going to use any electricity at all during the peak hours. Now, on Cozy, that's between 4 and 7 p.m. Those are the real punitive hours where it is crazy expensive. So we're actually not going to run the heat pump during those hours at all. We're going to switch it off, or we're going to tell the system just to shut down. Then for the rest of the day, when we're in the mostly expensive part of the day, we're going to run as much as we can off the batteries until they're exhausted. And then during the cheaper parts of the day, and with Cozy there are 3 cheaper parts of the day, we're going to charge the battery up, but we're also going to operate the heat pump directly from the grid during those times. So this is kind of like the perfect storm. This is the best you can possibly do to get them as much as possible out of the Cozy tariff. Now, you've got to stay on top of this. You've got to make sure that you're keeping an eye on it to make sure it's doing exactly what it is. You can't afford to be lazy with this, because if you take your eye off the ball, something won't happen. A battery won't charge at the right time, and before you know it, you're paying crazy amounts of money. So if we were to do that over those 3 winter months, our Cozy bill that would have been £302 comes down to £167. So we'd save ourselves a significant chunk of money just by staying on top of the tariff and putting in a relatively small battery. And this really shows why I say that the Cozy tariff as it is really isn't fit for purpose, because it only really works if you have a battery storage system. But what if you're in the situation where you can't get smart tariffs? Now, there are a lot of people that I hear from in comments on the videos who live predominantly in the north of England, where the smart meter rollout was botched, I think is probably the best way I can describe this. But smart meters were put in that had no chance of ever communicating with the supplier. And those people are basically stuck with fixed tariffs. They can't get access to Cozy, to Octopus Intelligent Go, or anything that requires your meter to report 30-minute samples. So if we look at that worst option, the fixed term 12-month contract from Octopus for basically anyone who doesn't have a smart meter, or anyone who is just totally ambivalent to what is going on and just decides to go on to the basic tariff, you would have paid £314.72 for that same period. Now remember, that's just for heating and hot water. This is not your whole electricity bill. 3 months of heating and hot water for £314.72. So let's say you had a gas boiler and it was somewhere in the region of about 90% efficient. So to produce that same quantity of heat, so to keep the house at the same temperature that I have now with my heat pump, it would only have cost you £278. And actually over that period, December, January and February, gas was even cheaper. So even without any optimizations, gas is cheaper. In fact, there are really no optimizations to do. You can turn the flow temperature down on your boiler just a little bit, but it would have cost you significantly less to run a gas boiler than it would have even to run it on Cozy or on the 12-month contract. Now, this isn't a problem with heat pumps. They work, they're efficient, they make the house, I believe, a lot more comfortable. They help reduce carbon. This is just about pricing. Gas prices have fallen to from around about 8 pence per kilowatt hour down to 5 pence per kilowatt hour at current rates. Now, that might not continue for much longer. With the current tensions in the Middle East and war between the US and Israel and Iran, we're starting to see oil and gas prices going up dramatically. And in fact, today, recording on the 2nd of March, we've seen a leap in gas prices for liquefied natural gas of about 13%. So if this isn't concluded quickly, those prices could continue to rise, and we will feel the impact of them when the gas capped price is reevaluated on the 1st of April this year, so not too far away. Now, over this period as well, while gas prices have been coming down, electricity prices have either stayed high or have crept up a little bit. Standing charges continue to go up, and we're starting to see in the tariffs that have the peak rate phases, the Octopus Flux, the Octopus Cozy, the sort of 4 to 7 p.m. periods where you get penalized for using electricity, those points where you get penalized, those prices are going up dramatically. And all of this has come together to widen the spark gap even further. The reality is, as electricity prices get higher and gas prices get lower, as that gap widens, the case being made for heat pumps is becoming less and less tenable. And if your primary motivation for installing a heat pump is saving money, you need to run the numbers very carefully. Because in my opinion, without solar, without batteries, without very cheap overnight electricity, gas is the cheapest option right now. Now, this might not be for much longer, as I've already mentioned, with the current war in Iran and the Middle East. That might change overnight. In fact, by the time you see this video, that might have already changed. So unless you have a battery system, you are likely to pay more to own a heat pump than you do for your current gas boiler. This isn't ideology, it's basic arithmetic. If the UK genuinely wants mass adoption of heat pumps, the spark gap has got to narrow. Either electricity needs to get cheaper or gas needs to reflect its environmental costs. Because homeowners are rational people. They will choose the cheapest option. They will not necessarily say, I'm willing to pay more because it's a greener alternative, or I'm willing to pay more because Ed Miliband wants me to have a heat pump. By the way, I don't think anyone has ever used that phrase. And right now, the spreadsheets still choose gas. So does this mean heat pumps are just a bad idea and we should just write them off and continue to use gas boilers? Well, obviously not. They're cleaner, they're quieter, they give a much more even heat, and in my case and others like mine with a solar and battery setup, they make complete financial sense. But that's not everybody's situation, and we shouldn't pretend that it is. Heat pumps win on efficiency, gas wins on price. So if you are thinking about getting a heat pump, if you are, please do use my referral code, which you can find down in the description of this video. But don't just take marketing claims at face value. Download your smart meter data, model your usage and run the numbers. And if you'd like help doing that, drop a comment below. I'm more than happy to help. And as always, if you find this video useful, please do hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. And if you can, please do consider becoming a member of the channel. Anyway, that's it for today's video. I hope you found this interesting. If I'm lucky, I'll see you back here real soon for another video. Take care. Bye-bye.